Well, this time, the beginning of our story is not the beginning at all, and on the island of Cord. On the 4th floor of the dungeon, there was the 16th in the unified ranking, Pixward, with 8 players. Ranked players who follow him and 200 elite members of the Silver Knight Guild. He says they can capture a small fortress with this force, but he can't. Calm down, because on the 4th floor of the dungeon, on the island of Cork, the boys appear every 2 weeks. Real gal, and they suffered a lot trying to defeat him in the last 5 weeks, and in the meantime, they spent a lot of time and money to strengthen their items and the pair, so with 3 minutes left, he thinks that for sure they were stronger after all their investments, but then they notice that there is an intruder, a man with only one manta there at the beginning of the dungeon, so he wonders who that weakling is, and then that man looks at everyone there, and Pixward asks what the hell is this, because he has no items and only a cape, and he wonders how that man managed it. Get past the defensive troops like that, wondering if he's a trained assassin. Elite, so he says no, a killer would never reveal himself like that, so seeing the name from the man he realizes that it is Grid, so he starts searching for the user, but doesn't find any user with that name, and he notices that not finding his name easily means that he is not a hunker, so he looks at his subordinates and none of them are understanding what is happening, because to think that someone not hunky-a-do would go there, and he says that's what it looks like, the guards are sleeping, saying that this is pathetic, so he says that this is an area controlled by the Silver Knight Guild, and he doesn't know how did that man get there, but they are going to start an important battle, and he better go back if he doesn't want to die, and so Grid says he was wondering, because his invisibility disappeared, and he wonders if it was because he was detected by Helgal, and says that this means he doesn't need that cape anymore, and when he takes it off, everyone notices the armor he is wearing, a very well-designed, golden armor, with some red details and a tail, and everyone is left wondering what armor this is, questioning if it's the only one, and also that tail, and then the hunker asks where they are looking, ordering that bastard to be removed from there, but then a fiery explosion happens, and Helgal-less roar, Helgal-less fire, it decreases resistance against fire by 50%, and so the monster to complete uses the pillar of fire, killing large parts of those who were there, so Pixar denotes that he ended up with half of the guild members with just a flame, and he thinks he has increased his fire resistance by 86%, but thinking that he would still take a lot of damage is a joke, and he starts asking if they failed again, but in that Grid starts to walk calmly inside all that fire, and Pixar asks what the hell is this, as the flames are strong enough to eliminate half the guild, but that guy is intact, so he takes it and starts summoning something, summoning a pickaxe and starting to break something there, and Pixar is amazed by this, so he wonders if it's a joke, as he's collecting mind, with Helgal in front of him like this, and Grid thinks he's hot as hell, asking why the job. It's just worse, and also because that or only appears when the goat respawns, and he says, so he must have to go to the dragon's home with his pickaxe too, and then Helgal attacks him, and then Pixward thinks it was a clean hit, and no one could get out of there intact, but then he notices that the Grid is intact with that attack, and he talks to Pixward asking if he can't do something with that monster, saying it was hot as hell before, but now it's getting worse, and in that Pixward says that this is not the problem, asking how he didn't get hurt, and so the boy comes back, receiving another attack, and says that this is nothing serious, saying that to sum up, this is the effect of an item, and then a long time before everything that just happened, boy thinks he dedicated himself for months to this, and did everything they wanted until they got there, and he wonders what the hell this is, and why the hell they're chasing him, and so he takes a sword in the back, and begins to wonder if he will die there, and a man calls he a fool, saying that he betrayed his trust, and let himself be carried away by greed and selfishness, even though they have a contract, and the kid notices that it's sure, and he tells Grid, who honestly never expected to complete this mission, and Grid says, who struggled for months in vain for it, and asks if he doesn't think his gilded work should have been rewarded, and then sure says that of course he will be rewarded, and for him who carelessly betrayed his trust, only death remains, and so a man appears behind him ready to cut his throat, and he thinks it's over, because he risked his life for that mission in the last few months, and who would have thought it would all end like this, and it starts getting frustrated, then he says that known as the best virtual reality game is Satisfy, and says that with over 2 billion unique players around the world, this fantasy world so large and vast is considered by many to be another world, and there are many lands still unexplored in that world, and even more than explored, and that place was one of them, the northern end of the cave, the deepest area of the entire cave, a place filled with all sorts of items and equipment, waiting patiently until a user show up and discover all his wealth, and a few hours ago Grid poor level 73 guy, starts to be happy to have found something, finding the item for Count Ashura's rank S quest, the legendary craftsman's rare book, and he thinks it took him a long time to find it, and any other player would have already given up, and he thinks about that stupid S rank mission, saying that he could have even given up halfway, and he begins to wonder, how much money did he spend just on equipment potions, so he says, who never mixes with Asura again, if he does not receive good for it, and while he thinks about getting the quest item, he looks at the item's status noticing that it is unknown, and he is told that he needs Palin's eye to analyze that item, so he is surprised, saying that he remembers well, it is a very expensive item, and he thinks the price has gone up too much, and he starts complaining wondering how much more money he needs to spend on that game, and why Heisa he always runs out of options in that kind of situation, and he thinks that has already taken out many loans because of that game, but he also convinces himself that he can always ask for more, and he says that you can always leave the debts for next month, so he uses analysis on that item, and obtain a legendary item, the rare book of Pagma. This book contains the debts of Pagma, a legendary blacksmith who transcended human limits, and with its use, he will become the descendant of Pagma, whose rank is legendary, and his reputation instantly increases by 500 across the continent, but then Grid is more than surprised to be of legendary class, saying that he never imagined he would gain a consumable legendary class, and he says that with this he can get one of the most powerful classes available, but then he comes back to reality saying that he is there to complete the rank S mission, and it wouldn't be a very smart decision to exist from the mission, or he can just sell it, which was also a fortune, because with legendary class he can get hundreds of millions one selling this, and he says he had to do manual labor because of his college credit and his gambling expenses, and his only talent was gambling, but how he invested too much time in that game, even your friends left you after a while, and your own family began to consider him a dead weight, but that is now water under the bridge, he can finally give God for his failed life. Then he thinks about his father, his mother and his family, saying that he succeeded, saying that his son's parasite finally got lucky, big, and he will sell the item immediately wanting to log out, but is told that he does not can log out of the game at this time, and the Kandi's secret request mission Ashur changed into the fury of Kandi Ashur, SS, then he wonders what's going on, and Kandi appears with several subordinates, and curses the boy saying that he let himself be consumed by greed, and the boy notices that he is there, and his new mission says that Kandi Ashur realized his selfish intentions and of stealing the quest item and became enraged, and he will try to kill him to get the item back, and the boy is surprised by this, and Ashur says that he decided to extract him despite his contract, but Grid, he keeps stamping his foot saying he did the right thing, because he didn't do anything, so Ashur tells him to continue making excuses, and asks his subordinates to catch him, and he returns to the scene where he is being beheaded, and wonders how many months he dedicated to this, then he says he can't die like this, and manages to dodge that sword blow, and says he will pass that mission, no matter what. He thinks, he is a level 73 player and he also has some skills, so he thinks he will take him down first by activating a stun, guardian shield, then that man uses a spell to break the stun, and he is surprised that the stun didn't work, and ends up being thrown away, losing half of his HP, and he gets pissed off again, because he blocked the attack anyway and lost half of his life, and he says that he knew that Ashur was the level 300 NPC, but he didn't know that his subordinates were so powerful, and he immediately thinks that that mission was not made for him, so he says that of course he knew this was going to happen, because he is unlucky even in luck, and in that he notices something telling him to wait a little, asking what will happen to the book if he dies, asking if will also disappear, so he says he can't win, and can't finish that mission, and in that pace he won't even get the gold for that item, and if that item disappears from your inventory too, he only has one option left, so Ashur starts shouting to his subordinates, saying that the boy plans to open the book, asking them to stop him, but Grid says it's too late, and starts to open it, him saying that he should have been a little more careful, and so the invocation begins, and the change class begins too, and he says he will overcome his limits, and the system says that all his skills and status have been reset, and he thinks that maybe he can beat that mission after obtaining the legendary class, and thus he becomes a descendant of Pigma, and several statuses which, or I won't read it to you, appear on the screen, and he realizes that he is now working class, noting that he is a worker even in the game, and he says that seeing him suffer is very satisfying. Ashur thinks this must be something very valuable, and he thinks he will start by wiping out the race of those idiots and finishing the mission, and so the class change ends entirely, and he gets the title of the one who became a legend, and says that everyone will die, but then he comes back to level 1 using only a boxer shorts, and by taking the slightest risk to his forehead, he ends up dying, and already in reality someone says that according to the operational team's report, the class change occurred 5 minutes ago, so Omen says he's on his way, and his subordinate will kill you to the summary of the report immediately, and so he thinks about this class change, saying that it looks fun, and after dying he loses 2 levels, reaching level -1. Patreon region, Patreon soldiers will kill him immediately, and the boy speaks to Asura asking if he would actually kill someone for this, just for using an item, and he chases the least knowing about it all the time, and calls him a fucking thief, saying that he tried to steal what's his for, and says that although it is just a game, and tells him to eat and live properly, and so he ends up coming back to reality, getting out of that bizarre capsule and saying that it was a lot of fun, while he has a kilometer-wide bag under his eyes, and he thinks he could have won 100 million won, but his mother appears, asking if he thinks she owns the company of energy for him to have the video game on at that time, and already in the operational office of Satisfied, the SA Choi Nahir group goes to welcome his superior, and he asks if she said that he is a class player 5 minutes ago, saying he never thought this would happen, saying it's fun, asking if she prepared the field report, and then here he is Lin Shuhua, the lead developer of Satisfied from SA Group, and she says his ID is great, and was a level 73 player, but is now level -1, and his real name is Xin Yanggu, and he obtained the rare book of Pigma, in the mission secret request of Asura, and she says that, according to the information department, he is just another one of those unemployed game addicts, that he settled in one city for about a year, and for 3 months explored numerous areas, with monsters of level 200 or above, dying multiple times in the process, and although the boss have ordered him to immensely check the legendary class, it is believed that the situation is a mere coincidence, considering your foolish and inefficient decision-making, but this obsession and determination in the game seem to have been the main factors, so he asks if it really is, saying that in his opinion, persistence is a great characteristic, and she asks if it makes any sense that it was all a coincidence, saying that it's a bit important as a team leader, but he starts to think this is hilarious, saying that like her, you know, if they follow the calculations made by the supercomputer Morpheus, the northernmost point of Pygma's descendant were supposed to be discovered 2 years ago, but that player not only found the northern end of the cave and also activated the associated quest, local quest, and item, asking if it is really possible to call all this a coincidence, and he says one more thing, speaking about its negative level, saying that the way it was developed, Asura's mission should be unlocked from level 350, but Grid ignored these requirements, and furthermore, he quickly used the item fearing that he would lose it, and as he underwent a class change, the standard penalty for going straight back to level 1 was applied instantly, and as he failed 2 ongoing side quests, lost 2 more levels, and normally players of level 10 or lower do not lose extra experience points when they die. But now he is at -1 level, so she is shocked by this, asking if he means something, and he remember if she understood now, normal players gain 10 status points per level, and now he is at -1 level, and it will take him 2 years to get back to normal beginner standards. Level 1, that is, he will gain 20 additional status points, 20 more points than any player at his level, and he questions whether this isn't more of an essential situation than a coincidence, asking if the word skill wouldn't also fit there, but she says that that's weird, saying that this means the game is unbalanced, saying that they should balance it immediately, but he says that this is not necessary, saying that as he said before, he doesn't want to worry about an inefficient player, and besides, Pygame's descendant is a relatively weak class in combat compared to the others, but then he looks at something and takes a scare, saying it's nothing, saying he's leaving, asking her to keep him informed about other important news. Meanwhile at Grid's work they talk to him, asking him to get his morning paycheck right away, so he hangs around until he gets there, and his bosses, they ask if they didn't say he was addicted to games, and they say he seems to beg and be a piece of shit, and besides, he is a terrible employee, saying that he always had the impression that everyone must have at least one talent, but he is a total failure, and so he goes home with that measly amount of money, and says that it's enough for just one more round, and he asks who would have thought that the first thing that pops into your head is a game, and you start thinking that should be ashamed, and think that that book alone could have been enough to change his life, but there he is, with hundreds of millions of won lost, and he spent so much time accumulating reputation in that city, and all this work to end up at level -1, and while he's sitting there crying his eyes out, the president passes by in the car, saying it's nothing cool as that user, and of course, but honestly, he thinks that's his advantage, but he'll have to figure that out on his own. Meanwhile the Grid wonders if it should look for something else to do with his life, because surely there must be something he is good at, and he begins to question. If there is nothing that is good, but then you think that is enough, saying that you will give it another chance. Game. Meanwhile the president thinks that the good thing about that brat is that he doesn't know when to stop, so at home he thinks about joining the game, because he wants to know what the class is like, despite having lost everything, and he says that as long as the capsule holds up, everything will be fine, so he thinks that is talking to her once again, and also thinks that he will definitely get his money no matter what happens, and so he connects to satisfy appearing there appealed more once, and wonders where he is, because that place looks nothing like the cave where he was. So he thinks he is still in the Patran region, but he has never fully explored that area. Then he asks if he couldn't have given him a break, because Libanir just because he extracted it is kind of too much, so he thinks he needs to find a sign to be able to locate himself, so when he looks ahead he notices something that looks quite dangerous, and when he looks inside he sees something you definitely shouldn't see, with a sacrifice going on with a woman lying down in the middle. He wonders what the hell kind of place this is, and so the system says he entered the Yadam temple, and he thinks that temples are places for players above level 150, this place is too dangerous for him current, and looking at his status he notices the class there and the title too, but he also notices that is at a ridiculously high weight, and thinks he is actually at level -1, noticing that he is not. It was a system bug, and he says that even so those options seem great, because he can use them, a repair skill to make money. And as for items he tries to equip one, and when can equip it he realizes that he can equip the level 60 level, and thinks that he would need no minimum 200 strength to use that, but also note that you will have to deal with some penalties, but even so he says that the attack power of the longsword is still 200, and the metal armor should give you about 130 defense, and level 1 items barely help you, so even with that penalty it continues to be many times better, and he starts to get happy, because classes are amazing, and could that parts above your level is wonderful, and he says it was blessed with great luck, but remember that he is still in that temple, and says that if that scale, level 150, everything in the vicinity of that area is at a similar level, and he wonders if the game is trying to stab with a hug. Then he hears that woman in the middle suffering in pain, and he thinks that since that is the temple of Eaton, he bets that there are some followers of Eaton there, so he asks if they are doing some kind of enchantment, thinking he will die if he stays getting in the way there, and a little scratch from them is enough to kill you, but in this one of the followers appear behind him, and he starts saying that he should be fine as long as it's not caught, and it shouldn't be hard to go unnoticed, but then the follower puts his hand on the boy's shoulder, and he drops the sword in fear, and then the man tells him to calm down, asking Strain's command. This is called Doran, and he thinks that since the boy was hiding, he believes that they are not, and then they go to a more secluded place, and Doran tells the boy everything and he realizes Stain's daughter, and he says that exactly she was kidnapped while was traveling on vacation, and although it is a complicated situation, it is good to have someone by your side, and Grizz wonders what he is talking about, but ends up receiving a mission that tells him to save the Count's beloved daughter, and he needs to save Irene within an hour, and the reward is 3,000 gold, and the possible reward is to become the Count's gender, and in case of failure he will for 2 levels. Then he notices that there is another S-rank mission there, saying that this is a great one of the damn NPC, and Doran says that most people are scared stiff, but seeing how he assumes he is someone strong, and in that Grizz asks if he is serious, and says that a weakling like him shouldn't be able to resist that, and he wonders if it's because of some innate ability that he has, and he thinks that it can only be that high control ability and the extent of falling into an abnormal condition are drastically reduced, and the speed of recovery is also increased, and he says that he should learn the advantages and disadvantages of his class soon. And Doran is surprised, because who would have thought that a warrior like him would help him, and he thanks him for help him in such a difficult occasion, but then Grid looks at him and simply asks who said, "Which is your problem?" and Doran calls him to go, but Grid keeps denying, and Doran sends the boy wait, asking if he will let him fight those black mages alone, and Grid continues, saying that it's none of his business, and saying that even though it sucks to lose 3,000 gold, he's in ladder because of another S-rank mission, and it would be crazy to do that one, so Doran asks if he is not able to withstand the dark energy, saying that he cannot fight it alone. Then he begs the boy, but Grid says he's only fine because he's lucky and nothing more, and he is at level -1, so if he fails he goes to level -3, then Doran goes back, asking him for help, saying that the Count's daughter's life is in serious danger, so the boy asks how many times he will have to repeat it, saying that he cannot help him, but Doran tells him, repeat, because he knows he is strong, and so Grid says no, but while they are at it, litany arguing, They don't even realize that a rock fell from up there, and that rock killed of the men down there, and so the mission to save the Count's daughter is active, and the boy begins getting angry, and Doran says that now he's messed with the temple and Tam, and he's so screwed. Tam's followers are fanatics, who make human sacrifices, and now that they have attacked, they will never let the boy go, and he says that it is his destiny, and there is no point in complaining, and he should just accept it with honor, saying that will open the way for him to save the Count's daughter, and so the guys from Tam call them of heretics, saying that they dared to hurt a son of Tam, ordering them to kill. Then Grid says that there are a lot of them, telling Doran that they must flee, and while those crazy psychopathic fanatics come at him, he starts to get more and more scared, and he thinks that even though he is using all his equipment, the restrictions limit his general skills to players of at least level 34, and if one of them blows, he dies, so he thinks he will die soon after respawning, and starts to get sad about it. Another one of the cultists falls next to him dead, and so they continue going after Doran, but he kills them one by one with great ease, and the boy thinks that Doran is the pestle, saying that he didn't think he could move at that speed in such a tight place like that, and with luck he might not die, and so several other cultists appear behind him, so he thinks that maybe he will die, and Doran asks if the boy doesn't think that fighting like that, and it won't take them anywhere, but Grid is sincere saying he doesn't know anything. Then Doran says he knows he's waiting to defeat everyone at once instead of losing time with those fragants, throwing the boy down there, pushing him and Tapra, and jumping right away behind, but the kid starts to think he's screwed, and so Doran uses levitation, not letting the boy get splattered. He says it's a spell to prevent fall damage, and he's a very modest for thinking such a simple spell is amazing. Then Grid begins to notice that he is not able to believe in others, and says that despite this, he is only alive because of himself, thanking Doran, and he says that it's time for the boys, it was the strength he was guarding, saying that the mission to save the Count's daughter will begin now, as they arrive there, below with several in front of them, and the cultists begin to invoke their magic to kill the heretics, because the souls of the underworld must fulfill their wishes, and Grid says that they are doing something type of enchantment, and Doran thinks it's black magic, saying it will be problematic if they let them continue, and he starts launching those channels asking if they found the same way, and he would demand they finish the spell, and one of the men notices Doran going after of the conjurers, telling the sons of Athan to find some time, for they must kill the Herades at all costs, and so they go for it, and Grid is surprised that Doran is killing everyone, them alone, despite them being in a level 150 temple, and thinks Doran is really amazing, and if this continues he may end up completing a rank S mission thanks to the NPC, so the only thing he can do is root for him, and he stands there saying that Doran is his hero, helping him to go all out, and the black magician in turn manages to complete the spell by playing 4 on top of Doran, and he ends up being caught by that black mass, and Grid says he takes back everything he said, because he always wanted to be a servant of Athan, and so that cultist says that's what happens with heretics, who get involved where they are not wanted, and begins to think that he will control Doran. However, he starts saying that he is Doran, Sten's shadow, the shadow that protects the family and will fulfill his duty until the end, and so he manages to let go of all that dark magic, and Grid is surprised, asking that he is a named NPC, and they start to do another enchantment, but Doran pulls out his daggers, this time energized with electricity, and he says that those who dare threaten the Sten family will never be worthy of receiving a second chance, and he launches their kunai towards them, but the shield appears and they are surprised, and then a woman arrives, saying that it is their lucky day, fearing that they will not get through, since protecting the ritual is her S-rank mission, and she says that she didn't imagine that her opponent would be a named NPC, Doran, and says that it's been a long time since she's been this excited, asking if they would grant her the permission to fight them, and she introduces herself to them as Yura, the Blood Witch, the player number 1 in Black Magic, and 5th place in the unified ranking. Yura, a South Korean player, a international celebrity who constantly appears on television for her beauty and skill, and she says he's very lucky, because he never imagined they'd have to face Doran on that mission, and thinks this will be fun, and she is known as a master among all black magicians, and Yura single-handedly surpassed the standard limits of her class with her incredible combinations and controls of magic, so he wonders why the hell she is there, and the girl immediately starts attacking the two, making them have to detour, and she asks if he was the one who accepted the rank S mission, and Grid is surprised, and she says that that place is perfect for her to test her new skill, without any cameras around, and says that it's all because of him, and she notices that he's using Mangal armor and Mammon's longsword, asking if it won't be a pretty tough fight for a level 80 player, and so Grid is surprised, as he got his level wrong, but ranked are really on another level, but it won't be that easy, and he tells her not to be so arrogant, because that guy over there is a named NPC. Then she says that in fact she was going to ask him a favor, saying that she needed one opponent to celebrate his arrival at level 230, so Doran asks Grid not to stand still, and he says there is no time to hesitate, and even a little more speed makes a difference when winning a fight, while being attacked, and Yura thinks that this is something that the named NPC. Yes, but she can't stand all that agility of his, and so she binds his leg with black magic. And Doran says that it even seems like he would have such a pathetic ability, and starts to do his daggers that were stuck in the ground float up to the girl, asking her to return the favor, so he can't hit her, and she says it's impressive, because he's already used one considerable amount of stamina, and he thinks he is strong enough to deal with misfortunes like her, but then he notices a spell being cast on him, and notices that she is actually attacking him on the side, and Yura says that he can thank her now, because she will make that powerful body of his a little lighter by draining all his blood, and so his blood starts leaking, and Grid thinks that it's useless standing there, and if he dies he'll go to Vala too, so she says that that's an advanced skill, and it uses 30% of your mana, and that's the end, but then Doran starts activating something in her hand, and asks if she isn't being a little too arrogant, wanting to show the strength of a power that has protected the family for a century. And so she is surprised, asking how he used the level 220 concentration skill forcefully. Then Grid asks what happened, and he says that it's all grace that ring, and in short his skills are very special, and even if their protection is not perfect, it should be enough against her curses, and speed up her recovery, and Grid soon attacks Zoyo in his ring, and Doran asks if the boy doesn't think he's being too direct, and he says that anyway Yura is not invincible, and they need to hurry, because it's time to counterattack, and so he summons another life to his daggers, attacking her, but she can't reflect them all, and thinks he's tougher than she expected, and thinks even if she needs to use her last resort as the most powerful ranked mage, she needs to ensure that will defeat them, so she says that the only thing she doesn't understand is the presence of that warrior, wondering how dangerous a high-level area is for a player like that of low level. Then he notices that they have respawned, and calls Doran saying that the mages have returned, and Yura seeing that gets angry, because she didn't want to complete that mission with the help of NPCs, and even so, accesses the chances. Then she calls upon the gods of darkness, invoking their magic, and speaks to Doran that it's all over, and that's your ultimate spell, using all your mana at maximum strength, and with that she launches the black storm towards the two, and Doran is scared thinking that it is over. But Grid steps in front, receiving that attack, so Yura thinks it was a bit of an exaggeration to use that within that time, but anyway they at least died, and she should get out of there. But then Grid, after receiving that attack, is completely unharmed, and Yura is surprised that he is alive even after being hit by her spell, and wonders how there can be someone so strong that she don't know. Then he wonders who the hell this guy is, and he thinks that for sure he was hit, but he still has 1 HP, and in that he notices that it is true, saying that he had that ability, the tenacity of legends, and he will become invulnerable for 5 seconds when his HP is low, and so he notices that he is alive, and Yura thinks who is he, because he thought he was level 80, and besides he is smiling, and in her eyes he has a very determined face, but really he's just all mean, and she wonders how there could be someone so strong that she knows, and who the hell he is, and so Grid ends up getting a slap on the back from Doran, and he says that he warned, saying that victory is always that of the fastest, and so Yura asks if he is saying that this is the final blow, telling you not to underestimate him, activating shield crystal, and he says he didn't think she could use a spell, so she says she is almost out of mana, and needs to finish that damn thing off before it's too late, but when she looks, Grid has already disappeared, and she thinks he left, and he didn't attack even though he was so strong, and starts to question what the hell that player has in his head. Meanwhile Grid is pissed off, real world, because he died, and he lost 2 levels reaching -3, and he died twice in the last 24 hours, then you won't be able to log in for the next 12 hours, and it starts to remember when Doran used him as a springboard, giving him 1 damage, and he ended up dying because of account of this, and he notices that he suffered friendly fire because of him, and starts cursing Doran, and so on. Yura stays behind, asking if he gave up his mission for her, asking how he did it. Gave up, saying that he swears he will find him, and will never forgive him. So the next day, satisfy community, the so-called Yura from the Yatan temple, and Grid starts cursing Doran, because he gave him a mission he didn't want, just to later kill him, and calls him a useless NPC, saying that he is not even useful to help the player, and he thinks that this is all Yura's fault. because if it weren't for her, he would have had his happy ending, but then, he calms down and says that it is difficult to admit, but this game is based on the survival of the fittest, and he begins to calmly reflect on everything, but then completely opposite to what he is saying. He goes to the player's thread, hates Yura in every way, and says he's the worst loser of your neighborhood, then starts telling her to die, calling her an evil shrew. Then her sister goes to him, asking if her brother has finally gone crazy, and he takes a huge fright, and that's Shinser, his 17-year-old little sister, asking if he can't clean the room from time to time, because it stinks too much there, and he says his hair is greasy, and asks when was the last time he took a shower, and as she starts cleaning everything, he tells her not to do that, asking if she woke up just to annoy him, but then she ignores everything that he is talking about and goes to his brother, asking if it is really possible to make money with that little game, and he says it's a very famous game, with 2 billion real players, so if you take it too seriously, it's possible to be successful. But she writes down everything her brother wrote about Yura, and he says it's their fault, saying that she has nothing to do with it. Then she says she doesn't believe it, that your brother does this kind of thing, saying that she is disappointed in him, and he tries to say that she is not happening, but you start to think that Yura is now screwing you over in real life too, and in that. A little later he is alone at home, because his parents are working and get irritated at Satisfy channel in peace, and there is a me from international newspaper says that it is on the scene of the breaking news, and the boy says that everyone the channel has some program related to the game, and it is really popular, and it says that if it stayed famous he could swim in river of money too, so he says he is in front of the temple of Athon, located in the northern region of the Eternal Kingdom, and last night the temple collapsed as can be, and he asks what could have caused so much damage. Then the boy is surprised noticing which is where he was, and the reporter says that his investigations led to the name of someone, and responsible for this is none other than Yura, a black magician who currently occupies the 5th position in the unified ranking, and they can take over the ruins of the temple, which there was a fierce battle in that place, and he says that they have now heard the testimony of a witness visual, and the boy says that yesterday he was forced to flee the temple, while the monster chased him, and suddenly he heard a noise, and what he witnessed was Yura trapped using a spell, powerful against a Ryung, and he says he almost forgot, saying that Yura is very hot in real life, so the reporter asks if they can continue, and the boy says anyway. Something surprising happened, and even Yura was shocked, as she used her ultimate spell. However, Ryung remained without a scratch, even after being hit by him, and then the journalist asks if it means he is an elite ranker, wondering how the boy couldn't recognize the face of someone so famous, but the boy says that a rock fell on his head, and while he was finding Yura, he ended up dying, and so the reporter says he understands, and wonders, who could this mysterious player be who has caught the attention of the entire world, and so the boy begins noticing that he's famous. And noticing that he's minimally famous, the psychopath Gray thinks he can make a lot of money, and he thinks he only sees himself once, and there's no way he's going to stand still, so he calls the contact center, saying he would like to report something to the international newspaper, saying that he is the player of the news of the Yada Temple, and so they ask which nickname, which he says is Gray, so they also ask what his level is, he says it is 1 of 3, and so the phone automatically turns off, and he thinks that if it weren't for Yura things wouldn't be so, and in the newspaper they say that finally they will show a last recording of the temple, and hope that the people can help with more information, and seeing the recording he realizes that Doran managed to save Irene, and he says he doesn't look well after all, so he says that's obvious since he fought alone against Yura. Then he realizes that in the end Doran died, and he feels sorry, because he was a good person, despite being just an NPC, and he thinks he also had that really cool magic ring, so he decides to go take a nap, and the newspaper continues with the next block of controversial topics. Satisfy, interview with the Rise player, and he introduces himself to everyone with his name Cods, Invis -3 level warrior, and Grid recognizes him as that famous arrogant brat, speaking, who heard that he is the heir to a large corporation, and he is quite impulsive, and they say that Cods reached position 53 of the unified ranking in a very short time, and they are all curious about the secret behind it, and the reporter says it's clear, because he managed to clear 30 levels in 3. Then Grid is surprised by this as it took him years to get to level 70, then Cods speaks that before answering, he confirms himself here in the Korean program, saying that the first ranked from Korea is Yora, and the presenter says that's right, so he talks to Yora, saying that the end of her era has arrived, saying that he will completely crush her pride, and become the next first ranked, but Grid says the guy is in position 53, and thinks he can face the 5th placed, calling him crazy, saying that even he who doesn't like one of the two, knows that Yora is a monster, and Cods wonders if they want to know what his secret is to the pair, saying that his secret is that sword, and so Grid says that it is very good, but wonders if in the middle nothing comes to say that. That is the key to success, but then Cods tells them to observe with their own eyes, and decide whether they believe it or not. Then he begins to envelop the sword in a completely badass aura, and Grid then wonders what that scary sword is, and he says that it is his passive ability. He can modify any weapon you have in your hand so that it absorbs a certain amount of your life force, that he converts into attack power, and she absorbs more life force as he attacks, causing he can farm faster, and so he puts the sword near the presenter, and she says that she never heard of a skill like that, and he says of course not, because he got it 3 months ago. Blood Warrior is the name of his epic class, and Grid realizes that it is another secret class, speaking that he got it therefore with the only skill, so he says he also wants his chance to use it. To his right, descendant of Pagma, and so he returns to the game, arriving at the village Jubara, but if it was there that he did the mission of Asura, and as the religion of Yutane gave the shield with him, it is impossible. Respawn at the temple, and in that he hears some people looking for a monk above level 130 who will go to the Mubade ruins, and several other people continue looking for very high level warriors. And Grid realizes this, but remembers that monsters outside that village are also all above level 100, and he says he can't step outside the village, because he's at level -3. So he screwed up, and he says it's better to go to a village more suited to his level, and he thinks that the village is a village of an image, saying that he can travel with one, and he goes to the coachman saying he would like to go to the nearest safe village, so he says that the village Isin would be perfect for a newbie, and says the service will cost 10 gold, and Grid even tries to look his savings, but realizes he only has 3 golds and 11 silvers, and apologizes, and at that the coachman sends. He disappears from there, but the boy says he didn't say anything, but the coachman asks if the boy isn't even leave, saying that his mother is sick, and he says that he would, so the coachman tells him to disappear, and so Grid can only blame unfair capitalism, and he begins to think he will die trapped there. Then he says he got hard because of that damn Ashore, and wonders why he had to change class and drop to level -3, and he remembers this class change, realizing finally that he is the descendant of Pigma, and can earn money and for it at the same time by creating items, and then thinks there is still hope, and finally thinks it is better to check your own states, because he may have something amazing on his hands, and he begins to see the craftsmanship of Blacksmith, and the attributes of all items increase by 10%, and your reputation and status increase with each item he creates, and he realizes that he has mastered the blacksmith craft skill, and is already in the level 1 of the legendary blacksmith craft, and furthermore he learned that the number 1 blacksmith was only at the intermediate level, so he says that this is amazing, because the creation skill is the better, he can create his own production method, and he can do it 3 times, so give it a chance, saying that if an epic class was like that, a legendary one must be better. Then he asks why he should continue studying, and so the system tells him to that he is using the legendary blacksmith's craft skill, asks which item he wants to create, and he says he will try a long sword, as it will be useful for pairing and farming, and the system asks what materials he would like to use, and he thinks he would be using something strong. Then he goes in blue orichalcum, remembering the man who was speaking in the square just now. Then the system asks him to enter the weapon characteristics after designing the scheme, and soon a screen for him to draw appears, and he is surprised that he will have to do it alone. Then he wonders what the difficulty is, because he will make it big and strong like a shark, and it needs to be heavy, lighter, darker, brighter, and the attack power is more than 8,000. And meteors fall from the sky with each attack, and she can ignore the opponent's defense and cause a death instant. Man, thank goodness Greed doesn't take his meds, because if he stopped being crazy this way he is very impressed, and so the boy continues very excited, drawing that it looks like a sword, half shark, half Hot Wheels, half car wash, and looking at that thing it's too much, saying it looks like a baby anchovy shark, so the system says that a calibration will begin, corrections will be applied according to the materials used and the design scheme, and so he is surprised by this automatic calibration, because it is fixing itself. He thinks he's exaggerated a bit, and he wonders what all those numbers and words are, and in this automatic calibration ends, he says that suddenly he can understand all those information, and it's your first time designing something, and maybe it's the effect of your class, and it's almost the same thing if he had become a real blacksmith, and the sword actually looks good, and it has 1090 durability and 1820 attack power, for 800 defense, and also 50 more agility, and he says that the states he exaggerated were adjusted a little, but it still came with all those extra options, and he is surprised by it. After all, each of those effects is totally stolen, and he says that now he just needs to get the blue orichalcum from the group Forest Guardian mission, but then he remembers that the guys are looking for people of the level 200, and then decides to leave the material aside, wondering what those absurd conditions are, and the user restriction is level 300 or above, and the strength is more than 5000, as well as the mastery. Advanced sword level 8 or above, and the weight is 550, he says that the first ranked place in the thread has just reached level 250, and he won't reach 5000 even if he places all their stat points in strength, and the number 1 blacksmith has barely reached the intermediate level, but it requires advanced sword mastery level 8 or above, and he says he fucked up with it. An invaluable purpose, a huge, powerful, shark-shaped shit, and he thinks that it is not completely useless, as he has no limit to equipping items, which is why he managed to use yours so far, and even though the penalty to equip it is large, the sword long remains the stolen item, and he just needs to find a way to create it, and so he decides to leave soon, as he needs to join the Forest Guardians group at all costs, and be carried, since alone being the level -3 and end up in his own grave, and so he will have the man who is surprised by him wanting to join the group, and tells him to get out, but then he asks why, and the guy says that that group is for players from level 190, but his equipment shows that he is about level 60, but the boy says he is level 100, but has some more humble equipment, and he says he plays well, and it doesn't make much difference. So, and then the guy starts asking if he's saying that he only depends on equipment, and the other questions how he, an unknown player, dares to underestimate his group, and he says he doesn't have no accessories, and just by looking at it you can tell that it will be charged, plus it probably. He's lying about being level 100, and asks if he's not ashamed of being so brazen. And then Regis tells them to stop, saying that only the guild will take care of the fight against the boss, and asks why they don't let him do something else, and then realizes that he is the Regis of the guild, Sadaka, and they say it's the first time he's seen it, so they say he's the first place in the martial artist ranking, and his nickname is Sacred Fist, and the equipment requirements of his class is so high that it is difficult to level up, but even so he is already past level 180, and Grid is already starting to get jealous that that handsome guy over there is a ranking, and he says that as the world is very unfair, so that guy who was pissed off says that Regis should be a little less kind, saying that they shouldn't accept suspicious players, but Regis asks, wouldn't it be better for them if they had more people to fight, and Grid starts to agree, telling them to leave everything to him, and he thinks that despite not liking Regis' face, he's a nice guy, so that recruiter says it makes sense, but he doesn't know if they will be able to convince the other members, but Grid begins to think that he should soon accept the decision of a ranking, telling Regis to give him a little push, then he asks them what about them, with his one-on-one ability, saying that there won't be a problem if he proves that he plays well, and so Grid notices that the shit hit the water, and the water hit his ass, and starts to think that now she drained, and in that Regis asks if he is ready, and in that the recruiter says that everyone agrees with the idea, and he asks if the boy's name is Grid, saying that the test is about to begin, but at that Grid leaves, running around saying that they are very boring, he needs to train his legs today, so he puts his foot down, and Regis wonders why he left, as it would have been nice if he had come with them, and so Grid says he knew it wouldn't work, and for now he's just going to try to make money to get the carriage, but in this system he is told to name the item, and he is pissed off at what he created it himself, but he says that thanks to him, he was able to understand how creation works, and since the crafting skill has a limited number of bones, he will have to make an item personalized when you need it, and you can see it as special training while earning money for carriage fee. And so he gives the name of failure to the sword, saying that this is just the start, and then he goes to a forge, but the man there tells him to go away, without the boy saying anything, nothing, and keeps telling him to go away several times, being impressed that he wants to learn about profitable production, asking if the kid is underestimating the craft, and he keeps hammering away, while complaining, asking how a brat who doesn't even know the basics tries to come there and steal his secrets, and Grid says he already knows it's nothing serious, asking him to give him a little help. However, the man says that he is not the only one who values that profession less, asking to tell something to him, saying that those who underestimate others and what they have are all the same, since they never did something with their own hands, and tells him to stop bothering him and go away, and so Grid, saying that it was his only way to get money for the carriage, and he wonders if he will die in prison there, but then the blacksmith comes out saying that he can't let him die, telling him to stop beating his head on the wall and chop some firewood for him, and so he gets a quest to chop 500 firewood, getting 10 experience points as a reward and 20 bronze, and so he is surprised, and says it's been a while since he received a normal mission like that, and he thinks he can stop like that, but he knew that it is possible to fail at chopping wood in that game, and it will be better if he analyzes the item first, and so he analyzes the old axe, with the durability of 6 and the power attack of 4.7, and the understanding of the old axe is at 100%. He learned the method of production of the axe, and he is surprised by this 100% right away, wondering if it is because of his passive, but understanding him having a real experience are completely different things. But then, when he looks at the log, he notices an arrow pointing exactly where he should hit, and he asks if he is indicating to cut there, and when he does that he manages to cut it first time, and says, that knowledge is really cool, and he thinks he'll become a millionaire quickly if he can understand the legendary items method, as well as ending that woodchopping mission quickly. But 2 hours later he is lying on the ground, and he starts to think that the stamina of the level -3 sucks, because he barely managed to cut 150 pieces, and he thinks he's going to have to keep going by force using the little strength he has, because he cannot leave the village if he wants to. Then it's time for him to get serious, and once again he tries to continue, and the system rewards the boy for this, making him learn persistence. Then he questions what it was, and persistence will make him not get tired easily, and his weight limit also increases, and the feeling of satisfaction will last for a long time. Besides that, for every 10 points in persistence, an indomitable status point will also increase, and he says that this is a limit skill, legendary, and thinks that's why he's not tired anymore, and feels a very powerful force coursing through his body, and he thinks he needs to hold on just a little longer, and he does finish that mission, and so he manages to finish all 500 pieces of wood, and the blacksmith is surprised that he finished 1,000 logs in just 6 hours, and Grid says it was easy, and says that despite his appearance he is also a blacksmith, and the old man takes this as a joke. As a brat, how can he be a blacksmith? But then he gets a mission to mine iron, and the blacksmith says he will believe him if he can do it, and Grid says he can get there at level 0 with 55 experience points, and asks to leave it with him, so he goes to the mine, but it is disbelievable that it took 3 hours to get there, when it should have only taken 30 minutes, and he thinks he scares the girl. He goes down there and just walks, but these movements are so slow. It even makes sense. After all, he is using level 70 equipment, with a negative level. He could take it away, but he can't, so he goes to the man who is mining, saying that Smith ordered iron mining there, and the man talks to his friend saying that he said that Smith sent there, but he wonders what the armor is, asking if the boy doesn't. It will only slow you down. They say they are already busy trying to complete their own quota, and he tells the boy not to bother them, telling him to go there and pretend to work. He doesn't have time to teach him, and he still says he'll complain to Smith later, and so they quickly hear the boy making a loud noise, and when he looks back, they ask that Grid managed to mine easily. They wonder how so, asking if it is possible to mine that much iron at once, and furthermore, he is wearing armor while mining, and Grid says that he feels like his body is going to break, but his mind remains spun, and he thinks that the blacksmith was not wrong in what he said, but he thinks that with this persistence he will succeed, and everyone there is surprised, saying that they can't help but admire him, and they say they feel bad for having underestimated him. He, saying that the boy is on another level, and they bet that he will be a great miner, and so Grid manages to mine almost the entire cave, obtaining 170 stones of ore, iron, and so he gives a big shout, saying that his weapon is persistence, and so Grid finally reached level 1, and the system says he reached level 1, and their stats that had dropped to the minimum due to a negative level penalty returned to normal state, and the basic stats of Pagma's descendant were applied, and the boy is surprised to be back to square one. He says that his status points, there are 22 at level 1, and the basic stats of your class add up to 165. He says that by adding the points, which he put into indomitable persistence, total 182 points, and so he notes that he has 40 status points, and he should gain 10 per level, and he wonders why he gained 40, and he remembers the 4-level difference between level -3 and level 1, so he is surprised by this. And the blacksmith starts talking about how he is ashamed of having treated such a talented person like a child, saying that he is jealous of him, and so the relationship with Smith increases by 60, and the reputation of dance prices increases by 200, and Grid is horrified by what he is seeing, and Smith begins saying that the two are blacksmiths grabbing the boy, and he asks the old man to go over there, saying that he suggests an item with a lot of demand for him to earn a good amount of money, saying that need money or enough to pay for the carriage, and then Smith says he has already prepared a certain item for him, saying that it is called Jaffa arrow, saying that it is a very special type of arrow, and Grid questions whether that is really an arrow, saying that consumable items like that, it's not worth it, but then Smith says that it's not a common arrow, it's made by mixing Jaffa arm, and he says that this allows her to ignore part of the enemy's defense, and she is very important for archers in the Forest Guardian mission, and Grid already realizes that there are 8,500 there, asking if it is possible to analyze that, and so he analyzes the arrow with a 6 silver price tag, and his understanding of it reaches 89%, 89%, and he will be able to use the arrow skillfully. He is surprised, because it's only 89%, saying that maybe you can get the other 11, if you use your deconstruction ability. Items, and Smith, who is all sweet, asks if he wants to learn the production method, and Grid says that he always played for this team, and Ferrero starts by saying that first he must place the proportional amounts of ores inside the furnace, and after that he must remove the limestone and iron impurities that remained, and as soon as the iron solidifies it will have become pig iron, but it is not yet ready to be used in the production of the weapon. It will have to be turned steel to have less carbon than the total contained in iron, and he tells the boy that now that he saw the production method he could try, but he says that achieving the ideal proportion of it may be difficult, but Grid is determined to get to work on it, and says he paid attention to the method of Blacksmith's production, and despite satisfying a realistic game, it is quite easy to gain knowledge of the works, and in addition it has the effect of class compensation, and there are signs for the direction and strength of the follies, so he says he managed to warm up the follies in just 5 minutes, and the system says that the descendant of Pigma is essential to temperature variations, and he can accurately measure the internal temperature of the furnace, and it reaches 700 degrees, increasing to 730, and he thinks this is really cool because he can know the exact temperature of the furnace, and at this rate he will definitely succeed, and so he completes the mission, receiving 80 of experience, and not only is he happy about it, as the blacksmith appears behind him, but Grid tells him not to come from behind like that, and then Smith says it's unbelievable, saying that even without having any experience with melting, he managed it, and says that this can no longer be done. Considered a mere talent, it even seems that Pigma has been reincarnated, and Grid thinks that he has struck a blow, but he is not the reincarnation of Pigma, but rather a descendant, and so he reaches level 2. Smith says that now they are going to make the arrowheads, saying that they need to mix Jaffa bar and the iron in a ratio of 1 to 12, then he says to leave the tip of arrow solidify for 40 minutes in the mold, then he will need to polish it. He should not forgetting the symmetry of the arrowhead while hammering, in addition to sharpening the end, and the process ends when he fixes the arrowhead on the stick, and says that the stick need to perfectly maintain the arrow's center of gravity to maximize its penetration. Then he asks if the boy thinks he can do it, and the system soon says that he learned how to do it. Jaffa's arrow, and Grid says he can definitely do it, and so his understanding reaches 100%, and Smith says he'll give him the materials, telling him to go ahead and start, and he thinks Grid doesn't. He is an ordinary boy, and the way he works metal is very skillful, and he says that he really is, saying that he still hasn't taught him how to make the arrow stick, saying that he's going to make some points, while the arrowheads cool down, but Grid says it's no problem, telling let him make the sticks. Then he says that his understanding has reached 100%, and he can see the complete production method of the arrows, and he learned so much just by watching the production, and he says the list is a little incomplete, but it will be completely full someday, and he says that can do it yourself, starting by sanding and straightening the distorted sticks, and cutting the sticks in the ideal size, and put the feathers at the end, and with the current status of dexterity and effect class, it gets a lot easier, and then Smith thinks he's amazing, saying he did it. Learn all this by watching, but then he sees Grid doing something and asks what the hell he is doing, asking why he is putting the arrowhead in the water, saying that even if there is the chance to get stronger, it will break, but Grid tells him not to worry, because he will reheat it after it cools, and Smith says he doesn't believe he knows how to temper it, but says it's a bit of an excessive process for a consumable item, and says it will end up making fewer arrows using that process, but Grid thinks they'll be worth more if they're more carefully crafted, and he thinks that what someone without talent like him needs to improve and progress is to try hard enough, and so he continues the process of creating. Then Smith says that all that's left is to attach the tip of arrow in the handle, and says that he is extremely talented, and in this Grid says that it is ironic, saying that despite being a worker in real life, he is having more fun working in a game, and so he thinks he is almost finishing the mission, but the system says that the breath of the legendary was activated, and so the arrow begins to change, and he wonders what that is, and is told, in the blacksmith's breath, and when he is concentrating on creating an item, the will of the descendant Pigma will finish producing the item, and all stats of the item being produced will increase by 5%, and there is a rare chance of assigning special effects to the item being produced, and so the arrow Jaffa special is done, and the rating is epic, and he gets a scare, so the mission is completed, and an epic item was produced, thus all stats permanently increased by more 80%, and the reputation on the continent increased by more than 80%, as well as he received 300 reputation points experience and went up to level 3, and he says that beyond its level it is epic, and so Smith says this is incredible, saying that even an amateur blacksmith like him made a perfect arrow, and asks if the boy is also fascinated by this arrow, but Grid is crying, saying that had to have made an epic sword, and Grid thinks that among all the arrows in existence, none. It deals more than 40 damage, and in addition it has the effect of ignoring the enemy's defense, and this arrow is really strong, so with that strength it should be stronger than a level 20 sword, so Sometime later Smith says it's a shame, asking if he can't stay a little longer, but Grid says he doesn't get sad, because they will see each other again, so Smith says that he more than deserved that. Telling him to keep it, he got 100 Jaffa arrows, and also got 3 Jaffa bars, and Grid wonders if this is because his affinity is too high, and thanks Smith for all that. Then Smith says it would be great if he lived with him, but Grid tells him not to do that thing, and he says it's a great gift, but the weight makes him very slow, so he thinks that, whatever, saying that he just needs to sell them all, and he sends players from all regions. Wait in wonderful items made by the great Grid, and already in the place of the Guardian's Rage Forest, that group is getting beaten up a lot by the monsters there, until an archer starts to saving him, calling him an idiot, saying he warned them to be careful, and that one is from Shuka, Sadaka's guild master. Her appearance, her first appearance, my god, she doesn't even look like the photo from my channel, and she asks if they still want to stay alive, telling them to wake up, so Haggis goes forward and hits, and Dobin also goes with his shield, Vantner goes with his axes, and she looks at all those who died, saying that most of them were pathetic, and she doesn't believe that they died by a bunch of weaklings after they killed the boss, but she says the damage is too great, and says it wasn't easy, but they managed to finish it, asking how they will divide the loot, and she says there are 30 iron ores, 8 ores of lime, and also 1 blue orichalcum ore, and Haggis says that the amethyst shield did not drop again, and Vantner says that they at least got the blue orichalcum ore, despite only achieving this after fighting for a whole day. And Shuka asks Dobin how many died, and he says that if you include the members of your guild, a total of 75 people, and the golems multiplied and caused a good deal of damage, while the main group took care of the boss, and she says that ranking missions are very difficult, and they need countermeasures to them. Then they go to the village of Byron, and say that the 4th raid also did not bring good results, and the value of the raid, Guardian of the Forest, is decreasing, and at this rate the player level in future raids will decline greatly, and it is said about the Tzedaka guild, saying that although the guild only has high-level members, its reputation is not very high, because they have few members, and the 17 guild members met while playing a game called LTS, which came long before Satisfy, and as they have few members, they always participate at once with regular players, but this has its limits, and Tobin says they need the Amethyst Shield for the chain quest, and they will leave the raid aside for now, because they need to strengthen the guild in general, and in this Regis says he doesn't care about that if he can fight, but Vantner says they better not be too hasty, and in that Jishuka says that it's okay, saying that from now on, the members of the Tzedaka guild will interrupt your raid activities and will focus on leveling up and improving your gear, and she talks that her goal is to climb 15 levels in 3 months, and she kindly says that those who don't manage it be killed, and in that she tells Regis that his minimum goal is 20 levels, and Vantner already starts to tease the boy saying it's a shame, asking if he knows what she's like, and that afternoon, Jishuka already goes to another corner, asking a man in a store to show his Jaffa flashers. Then she says that the guild situation is really not good, because they used to call a lot attention at the beginning of the game, but now not even 9s appear, and she needs good flashers, but in this, looking at the market, she asks what kind of idiot is selling flashes for 18 silver, which would be the faster than the price, but in that she notices that it is a rustic arrow, an epic arrow, so she looks at all those statuses, and wonders what that is, because she asked for special flashes for pretty much every blacksmith, but none of them have ever heard of epic flashes before, and she says that they are absurdly stolen and can be decisive weapons in high-level battles, and you have to buy them now, but ask who the hell produced them, because it can only have been the first or second best blacksmith, Pamir or Stang, and if it wasn't any of them, it means someone already did killed. Meanwhile, Rhaegas begins to wonder how he is going to gain 20 levels in 3 months, and then Vantner tells him to think carefully, because she must have been serious when she threatened to kill him, so he says all he can do is pay for his last meal, so Rhaegas stays planned with his friend, but they end up receiving a message from the guild saying that they need find a person, a blacksmith, and then Rhaegas says that she just sent them a pair, so asks what his average has in mind, but Vantner notices that he read the message, as his anger has changed very fast, and she says that that blacksmith is able to help them make the Guardian's radio of the forest, and Vantner says that if the media is so committed to finding it, they need to get soon, and she says that they are an elite group, and since the last half of last year, they are always occupying one of the top 3 positions in the ranking of their classes, so there is no way. He declines your guild's invitation, and even though they are not as famous or influential as the others guilds, no one would dare deny the power and authority of their guild, so they are Zadaka, and they are very welcome, and she says that if he is really better than Pan Min or Stang, the best blacksmiths, then your items are far superior to what is for sale on the market. And all the guilds in the continent will be crazy after him, and they need to find him before the others at all costs. And in a mining a door, start focusing on the rumors, because all the big guilds are in search for a famous blacksmith, and by all accounts, he made an incredible item, and everything satisfies us. They're talking about it, and Famir hears about it, about the epic Jaffa arrows, and he reads in the item description, which says that it is an arrow made by a craftsman with great skills and material, but with little experience and reputation, and he thinks that even he was not described like that. In the item descriptions, he says that although he only got it twice, he was the first to produce a unique item, and has always prided himself on trying harder than others, but he wonders, who the hell would this idiot be, while this idiot is eating caperame at work, and he wonders what time work actually opens, and while he's in line he ends up taking an elbow, while someone is applying for a job, and he thinks that guy should feel sorry for the unemployed young people, so the man again says they need coaches, but the kid keeps getting beaten up a lot while he goes to volunteer, and he says that he also needs to earn bread, telling them to let him work, but they say they don't have it. Time for the little fight, and the man then offers a vacancy to do the wiring, saying he pays 11,000. Won the job, and Grid says that this is the worst job of all, and he ended up trying it last year, but he ended up spending more on medicine than he earned, and he says he won't accept it, but in this the man lifts the boy's arm, and he ends up having to do that, and the next day he goes to a job already dead, and his mother says it's just dawn, but he says he's already late, but his father asks to speak to the boy, and he thinks he is late, asking what his old man wants with him, saying that after paying off his loans, he will only have 9,221, and in that he tells the boy to take the day off, as it will cover his pay, but the boy notices that only there's 70,001 there, and he gets 90 a day, so his sister tells him to be thankful for at least having I win something, and she gives him something, saying that she prepared his bath, asking him to rest a bit, little, and he says that thinking about it, he should already be at work at this time, asking if there is late, wondering if they wanted to have breakfast with him, then he notices that he has a very good family, and ends up acting crazy, asking his father if it would be possible for him pay off his loans too, and ends up getting a bowl of rice in the face, and so he goes back to the game, thinking that resting and playing a little is good, but seeing your bank account empty and your loans means that spoils everything, and he wonders how much he earned for the arrows, because he needs to hurry to the village, and when he opens it, he gets a big scare, because there are people who earn 72 silver on their arrows, and he notices that if it's 72 silver per arrow and there were 99 arrows, so he earned 71 gold and 28 silver, and since 100 gold is worth 12,011 and 8,011 is 6 hours, he doesn't need more work, and he goes directly to the bank asking for his gold, but the banker says that now are 60 gold and 59 silver, as epic items are taxed at 15%, and Grid starts talking about tax. It's theft, but he can make money so easily there, maybe he doesn't need to leave. He realizes that it is too much to stay there because of the mischief and says that he does need to leave, and already in the cart he starts saying that 8 gold and 90 silver is too expensive, and Kochiro tells him thank you for giving him a discount, asking if you think it is easy to drive a carriage, and in that Grid asks him why the village of Winston is not considered a city. And Kochiro says that as the population has increased it should soon be called a city, and he says, having heard that Count Stencer's son was the lord of the city, and Grid feels like he has heard of that name before. Of place, then they notice that they are getting there, and he says that he finally got to the next one, village, and when he gets there he notices that it is 4 times bigger than the village of Byron, and in addition the center. From there it's much busier, and he needs to start off on the right foot there, and he will start cleaning out his inventory, as walking through those streets is quite difficult, and he thinks he can throw everything you don't need into a warehouse, but then wonder how come, thinking that it doesn't Mammon's item and not Mengel's yet, and he wonders if the penalty drops if he understands it. But in this the understanding of Mammon's long sword reaches 33% and that of Mengel's metal armor reaches 65%. He says that unlike the axe it did not go directly to 100% and the system says that understanding Mammon's longsword decreased from 30% to 20% and Mengel's metal armor defense penalty from 20% to 8%, and he thinks he has now seen an advantage, and the durability of his items is quite low, and he could increase his understanding by repairing it, but he needs to save money, and he thinks he will propose your items in the warehouse since it needs energy to make new items, and so it buys a space, and the attendant there says that each storage container costs 30 silver, and he asks for a discount, but obviously doesn't get it, and says he'll only keep his sword and armor for while, and he says he will keep the special Jaffa flash with him in case of any emergency, and he realizes that now that he has taken off his armor he is super light, and it is time to go after a forge, and so he notices that there are only knobs there, and there are the most advanced people, and he realizes that they are not so unbalanced there, and goes after a forge, noticing that it is large, saying that the blacksmith there must be at least at an intermediate level, that is, he must be quite a few fine people with him, and so he opens it and shouts the blacksmith, but notices that it is empty, and the man asks who is there, asking what grid he wants, and he notices that that guy is drinking and lying there, and he says he wants to learn how to make the most profitable item in that village, asking for a helping hand. Then the man says he can't help, saying that the Marrow company is buying up the forges in the area, and selling items at retail, and he says that thanks to him he can't sell anything there, and he starts saying that that forge also closed a long time ago, and so Grid says they are a pain, asking if he can recommend another one nearby, but then someone comes calling the old man, asking if he has made up his mind, telling him to hand over the place while they are in a good mood, and Grade thinks to himself getting disappointed, because he thought he was lazy, but he is literally unable to sell, and that man starts teaching him the sales contract, telling him not to abuse his patience. Then Grade realizes that they want him to sell both the forge and the land, saying that this Marrow group must be a big company, so he thinks he'll get out before it gets to his side, and in that, the man asks where he thinks he's going after seeing the contract, asking Grid if he's the spy of the Scania company, and in this it is noted that what appears to be the Mir hired a hostile NPC to do the work Sojo, and he thinks that hostile NPCs also kill players, and playing for their movements, those canaries seem to be about level 35, and better a living coward than a dead hero. Then Grid says that it's not that, saying that it's his first time in Winston. He doesn't know anything about that place. And this NPC says that's what he thought from your clothes, telling him to disappear immediately, and then the old man starts to curse him, saying that they are going to destroy his family's business, which has lasted for more than 7 generations, and the henchman asks if he has the idea how much he is bothering them, saying that it would be great if he handed over half of the payment to compensate for the headache, and so Grade thinks that this money is almost enough for him. First open a shop, but then another NPC says that in addition, his son died of a illness, so he has no future, and he also wonders if that place is his grave, and the old man tells him to wash his mouth before talking about his son, and so he gets pissed off, thinking he should calm down, because he has no way of defeating them, also thinking that he should leave, saying that this is not it's your problem, but he starts to wonder if that old man is going to be okay, and so he gets a mission, Blacksmith's Fury Bee, and he wonders what the hell is that, because a mission right now, and the mission orders him to destroy the contract between Khan and the improvement company, and rewards the minimum Khan will increase greatly, and maximum affinity with Khan, and reward for accepting the quest is the blacksmith's rage skill, and he realizes that he has a reward just to accept, and besides, it's a class-related skill, and he needs to accept it, but he wonders what his chances. Then he says he has the legendary blacksmith's patience skill, and furthermore, he has an ability that makes him invulnerable for 5 seconds if his life drops enough outside that his stats leave him at about level 20, so the biggest problem is the fact that he left his armor and his sword in the warehouse, and he has nothing to fight with, but in that he remembers that he has an epic skill, and summons the Jaffa arrow, thinking that even if the attack power is weak, his ability to ignore the armor should be enough, and so he asks the evil NPC if his mother didn't teach him to respect his elders, and Khan asks why he's getting involved. Then the NPC asks why he hasn't disappeared yet, and Grady says that even defeats have their limit. Then he asks if he decided to go crazy after they released him, and asks what he will do with that arrow, telling him to shut up and get out, and Grady says he can even be an arrow, but also has another weapon, and so the blacksmith's fury skill is activated, and the NPC wastes no time trying to attack, but Grady steps out of the way, wondering since when the warriors are that fast, so he thinks he needs to gain an advantage, and goes to the stairs, because they are narrow, and he asks who wants to become a little sin, so everyone starts to climb, but the boy quickly activates the blacksmith's fury again, sticking that arrow into him, hitting a critic, and they are surprised, because it is just an arrow, but the boy asks if that it's just an arrow to them, asking how about they try it too, and with that fury of Blacksmith his power and speed increase a lot for 20 seconds, and then the count starts to go down, and he thinks he's already hit twice thanks to his increased attack speed, and on top of that, the armor ignore passive activated both times, and so he killed the bandit Winston, and the reputation in the village increases by 60 points, in relation to the bandits, Winston became hostile, and he gets 4,300 experience points by leveling up 5 times, so he gets to level 8, which is surprising since he gained 5 more levels at level 3 by killing the level 35 NPC, so his status points went to 110, and he thinks those jerks have good attack power, but his defense is weak, and he needs to put his agility and strength points to kill the rest. And he will have to use all of them at once to be able to kill those 4, and after using all of them, the points he dodges another attack and hits that bandit from the side, throwing him far away. Then asks if he's okay, he says he can still fight, and says maybe it was luck, because the redhead says that the brat is fast, and besides his weapons are useless fighting in that narrow staircase, and he thinks he couldn't kill him even using his status points, and he thinks that the ability to ignore armor and critical strike didn't activate this time, and then the redhead asks if he is going to stay there forever, asking the boy to get down, and he says he has no other choice, saying he will have to face him, and the redhead says nothing will change even if he refuses to obey, so he thinks he won't last 3 hits if they surround him, but he still has another card up his sleeve, saying that even if his HP is very tall and has no armor, he can overcome them the instant they all surround each other, because he only precedes enough HP to be able to continue. He needs the patience of the legendary Blacksmith, and defense vitality and dexterity increased by 200% for an hour, and he says that's all skill he needs, and so the Rivo thanks him for not continuing to make a losing effort. He will make him pay an interest or kill one of his companions, and greed sends him falling into it mentally, activating the legendary Blacksmith's patience, but the system says that this skill does not consume mana, but it cannot be used intentionally, and it will activate naturally or continue fighting to survive, and so the Rivo asks if he is ready to die, and Greed is totally shocked that the ability failed to activate, and the henchmen don't expect the drama of him attacking the boy, and he thinks he's screwed, because the skill he needed it most failed, so everyone attacks at the same time, and he says his max HP is only 316, he has to take an intermediate option to increase his HP, he has to wait the second cooldown, because he needs to resist during that time, and so he resists one more attack, stopping an axe with the arrow, and thus receives 200 damage, cutting his leg, and in this he ducks in pain, but manages to escape another attack, and he thinks he's going to have to take other expensive potions to stay alive, and he thinks each one costs 10 goals, or 24,000 ounces, and he ended up spending more money on a B-rank mission than eating fried chicken, and so he sends. Approaching him, he continues to dodge all the attacks, and they say he is dodging indeed, but they want to see how long he can keep going, and the boy is surprised that they are much stronger, even with the buffs, and it takes a lot of time to at least, unless his legs recover, then he goes back, and the men are surprised, and Grid takes over, that he is stronger than they expected, and tells them to pass on the contract and no one will get hurt, so they tell him to stop talking shit, asking if they really think they're going to deliver, after he killed Neo, saying that he will kill him anyway, and Grid says that he is being sincere there, saying that he won't kill them, and then he realizes that the potion's cooldown is almost early, he needs to buy a little more time, and the little bandit keeps arguing with him, but Grid catches him in his cowardice by hitting him directly in the head, and the boy asks why he let his guard down, saying that they are not close enough to talk to him like that, and so he kills Johnson, managing 4,300 experience points, going up 3 levels, and horror, I'll say I thought he was strong, but it turned out that it was just the effect of the potion, calling him a filthy cockroach, and starts trying to kill him. Boy again, and Grid says that if he's going to come at him without being careful, he's now level 11. They will be totally different, and so he hits that bald guy's chest, but he can't kill him, and the bald guy tells him to hit him as much as he wants, but says he will have to pay with a death. Not very fast, and he gets an X cut in the middle of his chest, and so Cam asks if he's okay, and he says he needs to keep dodging so he can take more potions, but then the bald guy catches him, grabbing him by the waist, asking if he's trying to run away again, and he says that's it. Dangerous, thinking that if this continues like this he will really die, so he thinks it's over. And when he looks up he notices what appears to be armor there, and in that he manages to stick that arrow in the back of the bald man's neck, then throws the arrow at the redhead, and starts climbing the stairs, going near the armor, and the redhead says he can't believe he threw his weapon away, and says that he can only be very desperate, and the boy tells him to talk as much as he wants, and he shouts to Cam, asking if he wants to protect that forge, and Cam says of course, saying that if he helps him, he swears he will protect her from now on, so the boy says he will get that armor borrowed, and he says that that item cannot be used by just anyone, and he says that the only that he can use are on the first floor, and Red wonders what's the point in telling him if he's stuck to die, and the boy is already putting on his armor, and he says his luck is over, telling him to die, but then Greed asks if they've heard of Overguided Kid, Manhwa's name. At that moment the cinema goes crazy, then they ask themselves who the hell is this jerk, and he kills all of Winston's thugs by leveling up multiple times, and Cam asks if he's okay, but when he looks at the boy, he notices that Greed is wearing that golden armor looking like a knight of the zodiac, and he tells the old man that this is amazing, wondering why he left something like that gathering dust on the second floor, and that armor and Valhalla, single rank, and gold restrictions are level 250, and 800 strength, 1000 strength, stamina, advanced heavy armor mastery, and the creator is Albertino, and in the boy's hand is Dainsleif's replica, a unique classification, and restrictions are also very high, and the creator is also Albertino, and the boy says that this Albertino is awesome, so he asks how he gets it, find the details of those items, and even who created them, and he says that kind of yes, speaking, who took a peek, but when he looks forward, he notices that Cam ended up falling, wondering, what the hell is this, also wondering if he has high blood pressure or something, because he passed out of nowhere, but he remembers that he was drinking a lot, and for this and other reasons old people should take care of his health, and he tells Cam that everything is fine, because he can stop pretending, the mission, it's over, and he needs to move on to the next one, but then he remembers his next mission, sending Cam, wake up quickly, and don't die before dealing with the next mission, meanwhile in Mere Company, and he knows that the mercenaries they sent have disappeared, and the man who went to train says that, recommended them because they were famous in the village, so the man tells him to shut up, asking how he will take on responsibility, and says that he is responsible for advancing their payment, and will have to compensate him for their failure, but he says he doesn't have that money, asking for more, a chance, and the man tells Beale to listen, because if he doesn't get the money, he might easily sell his relatives in the slave market, and sends the man up in front of him, and he talks to Rabbit, asking him to tell him exactly what happened, and he says that this is a fact, that they really went to the forge, but apparently, they disappeared after that, and Valmont says that there can only be one forge per village, and he needs to take that one. He can't believe they couldn't even do that, and asks about Old Man Cam, and Rabbit says he is very cruel, he mercilessly got rid of an employee who worked for him for the last 10 years, and says that a witness claimed to have seen a young man carrying Cam to the clinic 2 hours ago, and Valmont notices that this young man might know something, saying that in order to take from that blacksmith he had to sell weapons cheaper, and made him ask for loans, and he failed to hook him, and he can't believe he missed that chance, and so to get around this whole situation he sends Rabbit to take care of it all, and man, honestly I just get really pissed off with these rulers who appear to be able to delay the protagonist's life. So we started this absurd work, Overgeared, and who doesn't know my channel profile picture is based on this manhwa there because I like it a lot, and you will like it too. There are 249 chapters where I'm reading, so I plan to bring them all to you. Like, subscribe, and ask for more below. From the legendary Blacksmith for me to keep bringing. See you in the next one. Gone.